Hello everyone, welcome to the MotionSpark channel. Today we are going to create this floating YouTube interface animation in After Effects. Using this technique, you will be able to animate any social media interface or any dashboard design you want in a clean and professional way. Before we get started, if you don't want to miss valuable tutorials like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to know when new content is released. And if you find this video helpful, don't forget to leave a like, as it really helps support the channel. Now, if you're ready, let's get started. Now, let's start by creating a white background. Double-click on the rectangle tool to automatically create a white shape layer. Rename this layer to BG, which stands for background. Then, move this background layer to the very bottom of the layer stack. Next, delete the previous background layer since we no longer need it. Here, I want the corners of the background to be rounded. To do that, open Rectangle 1 and select Rectangle Path 1 inside it. Now, set the roundness value to 55. This will give the background smooth, rounded corners and create a more modern look. Now, let's start by adding an animation to the search button. Open the Scale property and create a total of 8 keyframes with 5 frames between each one. Here, we will enter different values for each keyframe to create a smooth bounce effect. Set the first keyframe value to 0. Set the second keyframe value to 110. Set the third keyframe value to 85. Set the fourth keyframe value to 105. Set the fifth keyframe value to 90. Leave the sixth keyframe value at 100. Set the seventh keyframe value to 95. And finally, set the eighth keyframe value to 100. After that, select all the keyframes and apply Easy Ease. This will give the search button a smoother and more natural bounce animation. Now select all the keyframes we created and copy them. Next, move to the icons at the top section with 4 frames between each one. Here, randomly select the icons and paste the keyframes we just copied. This way, each icon will use the same animation, but will start at slightly different times. As a result, all the icons will appear with a more dynamic and playful random bounce effect. Now, select the Create and Plus text layers inside the circle and open the Position property. Create a keyframe here. Then, move forward by 30 frames and create another keyframe. Now, go back to the first keyframe and move the texts downward. After that, select all the keyframes and press F9 on the keyboard to apply Easy Ease. Next, open the graph editor and adjust the speed of the motion to make it smoother. Now, select the plus layer and hold Shift on the keyboard, then press R to open the rotation property. Create a keyframe here. Then, go to the last keyframe and set the rotation value to 1. After that, select the keyframes again and apply Easy Ease. Finally, open the graph editor and fine-tune the motion speed once more. This will give the plus layer a clean and smooth rotation animation. To make the text appear one after another, I move forward by 4 frames and shift the Create text layer slightly ahead. Now here I want the text to appear from inside the rounded rectangle because the current look does not feel very clean. To fix this, select the rounded rectangle layer and duplicate it. Then move this duplicated layer above the Create layer. If you do not see the Track Matte panel, you can click on Toggle Switches/Modes to enable it. Now set the Create layer to use the duplicated rounded rectangle layer as a track matte. Next, duplicate the rounded rectangle layer again and apply the same process to the plus layer. This way, the text will appear as if they are coming from inside the rounded rectangle, giving the animation a cleaner and more professional look. Now let's zoom out the composition view. The best way is to switch to Fit mode, so the design we are working on perfectly matches the panel size. Great. Now let's move to the moment when the search bar is fully formed. Then select the channel logo and align it to the same timing. Now take the scale keyframes that we copied earlier and apply them to the logo layer. This way, the logo will appear in sync with the other elements using the same smooth bounce animation. Now select the channel name and all the text below it and move them to the moment when the logo appears. With all the text layers selected, press P on the keyboard to open the position property. Create a keyframe at the starting point. Then move forward by 20 frames and create another keyframe. Now go back to the first keyframe and move all the text layers downward. After that, select all the keyframes and apply Easy Ease. Next, open the graph editor and adjust the motion speed to make the animation smoother. Now, hold Shift on the keyboard and press T to open the opacity property. Create a keyframe here. Then, move forward by 10 frames and create another keyframe. Now, return to the first keyframe and set the opacity value to 0. After that, select all the opacity keyframes and apply Easy Ease again. Finally, move the start of the opacity animation 2 frames after the position keyframe. Now, to make the texts appear one by one, arrange the text layers with 3 frames between each layer. This way, all the texts will appear in a clean and smooth sequence. Great! Now we will apply the exact same animation steps to the rest of the text layers. Since the workflow and logic are identical, repeating every single step again would make the video unnecessarily long. So for this part, I will move through the process a bit faster. But there is no need to worry because all the settings we are applying here are exactly the same as the steps we just completed together. If at any point something feels unclear or you think you may have missed a step, you can simply pause the video and replay the previous section. This way, we can save time while keeping the workflow efficient and focused. Now, let's take a quick preview render and check if there are any issues. Great! Everything looks good so far. Next, let's create a null object in our scene. Press Ctrl+A on the keyboard to select all the layers and convert them into 3D layers. Then, parent all the other layers to the null object. With the null object selected, open the Position, Scale, and Rotation properties. Set the scale value to 55 to slightly reduce the size of the interface and create keyframes for all these properties. To add depth to our interface, adjust the rotation of the null object to a suitable angle. Now move to the second in the timeline and adjust the interface rotation again. Then increase the scale value and finally adjust the position to refine the composition. This will give the interface a more dynamic movement within the scene. Now select all the keyframes and apply Easy Ease. Finally, open the graph editor and fine-tune the motion speed to make the animation feel more cinematic and smooth. Now let's make a small adjustment here and quickly fix this issue in the scene. We will apply the same track matte process that we used earlier. To do this, duplicate the background layer and place it above each text layer. Then, set those layers as track matte layers. This way, all the text will appear as if they are coming from inside the background rather than entering from outside. All the steps we are performing here are exactly the same as the ones we applied earlier. Now let's move on to the next part. Select all the video thumbnail images one by one quickly. Open the Position property and create a keyframe at the starting point. Then move forward by 30 frames and create another keyframe. Now return to the first keyframe and move all the images upward. After that, select all the keyframes and apply Easy Ease. Next, open the graph editor and adjust the motion speed to make the animation smoother. Now, once again, arrange all the layers with 3 frames between each one. This way, all the thumbnails will enter the scene one after another in a clean sequence. Now let's quickly fix the issue where the layer order became misaligned. We will solve this by slightly adjusting the timing of both layers in the timeline. This makes it easy to correct the problem. Great, everything still looks good so far. Now select all the video title text layers one by one in order. Open the Position property and add a keyframe. Then, move forward by 30 frames and add another keyframe. Now go back to the first keyframe and move all the texts downward. After that, select all keyframes and apply Easy Ease. Next, open the graph editor and adjust the motion speed again. Now hold Shift on the keyboard and press T to open the opacity property. Add a keyframe here. Move forward by 10 frames and add another keyframe. Then return to the first keyframe and set the opacity value to 0. Select all opacity keyframes and apply Easy Ease again. Finally, move all keyframes 2 frames earlier. This makes the animation start faster and feel smoother. Now for the final small but important detail. Before the video thumbnails fully settle into place, we start positioning all the video titles a few frames earlier, one by one, under their corresponding images. The goal is to create a more natural and smooth animation flow. This means the titles begin to appear slightly before the thumbnails fully land in position, which creates a more dynamic and polished motion effect. We adjust each title in the timeline so it stays in sync with its corresponding visual element. As a result, nothing appears at the exact same time. Everything enters the scene with a slight delay, making the animation feel much more professional and refined. Now let's take a quick preview render and carefully review the animation to check if there are any issues. Great, everything looks good so far. Next, let's add a colorful stroke around the edges of the background. To do this, select the background layer and duplicate it. Then move the duplicated layer to the bottom of the layer stack. With the duplicated layer selected, turn off the Fill option and enable the Stroke option. This will start creating a clean and eye-catching outline around the background. Now, let's open the settings of the background layer. From the Add menu, select Trim Paths. Then open the Trim Paths properties and move to the beginning of the timeline and set the end value to 0. Now add a keyframe to the Start property. Next, move forward to 2 seconds in the timeline and set the start value to 100. After that, select all the keyframes and apply Easy Ease. Then open the graph editor and adjust the motion speed to make the animation smoother. Now add a keyframe to the Offset property. Go to the point where your animation ends and set the offset value to 1. Again, select all the keyframes and apply Easy Ease. Then open the graph editor and fine-tune the motion speed once more. Now here I make a small timing adjustment. I move all the keyframes 10 frames earlier. This allows the stroke animation to start about 10 frames after the scene begins, creating a more balanced entrance. Now let's make only the stroke layer visible. Here, I want the start and end edges to be thinner. For this, open the Rectangle 1 settings. Go to the Stroke section and scroll down a bit, then enable Taper. Now set both start length and end length to 8. This will make the edges of the stroke thinner and more visually appealing. Great. Now go to the Effects and Presets panel and apply the 4-color gradient effect to the stroke layer. You can change the colors if you want, but I'll keep it as it is. Next, go back to Effects and Presets and apply the Deep Glow effect. Since the glow is a bit too strong, I'll reduce the radius and exposure values. Nice, everything looks perfect so far. Finally, I'll make a few adjustments so the background is not just plain black. Now let's add a new solid to our scene and rename it to BG2. Then once again, apply the 4-color gradient effect to the solid layer. Now let's change the colors here. You can use any colors you like depending on your design style. After choosing the colors, quickly adjust their positions. The fine adjustments you make here will directly affect the overall look of the background. The more precise your tuning is, the more polished and professional your final result will be. Finally, select this solid layer and move it to the very bottom of all layers. This way, the new background will sit neatly behind the entire composition. Now let's create an adjustment layer in our scene and rename it to Grid. Next, go to the Effects and Presets panel and apply the Grid effect to the adjustment layer. Now, from the corner section, we adjust the size of the squares. Here, you can set the square size based on the scale of your design. Now, reduce the opacity value to 2 and change the blending mode to Add. This setting allows the grid lines to blend more softly and add a subtle glow to the background. Finally, with the grid layer selected, choose the Ellipse tool and double-click on the screen. This will automatically add a mask to the grid layer. Now, open the mask settings and increase the feather value. This creates a softer transition around the edges and gives the design a more modern and professional look. Finally, let's add one more null object to our scene. Now select the Null 1 layer and press U on the keyboard to reveal all keyframes. Then move to the point where the last keyframe is located. Next, move Null 2 to the exact time where the final keyframe exists. After that, convert the Null 2 layer into a 3D layer. With Null Object 2 selected, open the Position, Scale, and Rotation properties and add keyframes to all of them. Then use the Parent and Link feature to connect Null Object 1 to Null Object 2. Now move forward to the 4-second mark and change the rotation value. Finally, select all the keyframes and apply Easy Ease. This way, after the YouTube UI finishes its initial motion with Null 1, the animation will not stop and will continue moving smoothly in a continuous motion. Finally, let's fix the small issues in the text elements. Here, we will use the same method we applied earlier. First, duplicate the background layer and apply a track matte to each text layer one by one. Once this process is applied to all text layers, any overflow or visual issues will be completely resolved. Now, let's add one final touch. Select all layers and enable Motion Blur. This will make the animation look smoother, more natural, and more professional. Now let's move to the point where our animation ends and shorten the timeline according to the final scene. This will keep the project organized and prevent unnecessary render time. And that's it! We have successfully completed our YouTube UI interface animation. I hope this tutorial was helpful and informative for you. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss new content. Also, feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the comments section. See you in the next video.